Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for this special series of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. I'm your host, Shanti Ryle, and this is year 2 of the Women of Influence series, delivering next-level insights and expertise live from GlobeSt's Women of Influence conference here in Denver, Colorado. And today we are so excited to sit down with Daria Walker. Before we dive in, a little bit about our guest. Daria is the founder of Walker Realty Capital, a principal mortgage broker focused in the San Francisco and Los Angeles commercial real estate markets. Daria has been involved in the origination of over $500 million in debt transactions since 2013 and has built her reputation on creating winning deal strategies and successfully navigating the often arduous loan process, which we will be getting into, I'm sure. She's an active member of the ULI, Los Angeles Capital Markets Committee, the former chair of the Los Angeles Mortgage Association, and spends her free time in the gym or golfing with the LPGA amateurs. Daria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. I was actually just chatting yesterday about how I need to start taking golf lessons.
Yeah.
Because so many conversations in this industry happen when you're spending, what, four hours? 4 hours on the golf course.
Yeah, and there's so many conferences that revolve around golf tournaments. It's a vital skill.
So if you know any good teachers, please let me know.
Okay.
But no, I know we covered a little bit from your bio about your career path, but I'd love to kick us off. Tell us where you're from, how did you get started in commercial real estate, and what was it about specifically like the lending financials side that drew you in and made you decide, hey, I even want to start my own business?
Yeah. Well, a lot of that was unplanned, right? So I'm from Northern California. I grew up in a small town called Sebastopol, California. I went to St. Mary's and I graduated with a master's in finance. I will start this off. I was supposed to be an attorney, but the LSAT kind of, you know what I mean? When you get a 155, you're going to community college for lawyers, so probably didn't want to do that.
Sure.
Got a master's in finance. I should also move it back a little bit. My mother was the CFO of the Alameda County Retirement Association, so she ran a pension fund. So I was always going to be in business. So finished my master's. I got a job at a community bank doing multifamily loans as an analyst. I did that for 3 years before I switched over to the mortgage banking side, worked for a firm that's now named Gantry, and realized that I kind of had the bug to originate. I was in a support role there, so I had to go to greener pastures, where I became an originator. I think I did that. So it was about 10 years before I started my own company, essentially. So I've moved to a couple different firms. Eventually, made my way out to LA. Moved there on March 2nd, 2020. COVID hit. The entire market went crazy. It was great. About a year later, I decided that the firm that I was with just wasn't the right fit, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I had been working countless hours into the weekends, picked up a lot of really high-profile clients, and one of them told me, why don't you go into business for yourself? And he was a builder out of San Francisco. And I told him that he was crazy, and he said, here's a small $5 million deal to sort of get your pipeline started.
Wow.
That gave me a $50,000 commission, gave me some seed money to start my business, made some major referrals within my first 12 months of being open. I think I closed something like close to $30 million.
Wow.
And it was incredible. And it put all of my self-doubt aside. Before I thought, when I was working for larger firms, I was at Marcus & Millichap, I thought that I needed the name because I didn't have a name for myself. So once I realized that the more I invested into myself, the more I build my own name, I don't need a larger corporation behind me to give me legitimacy. And that gave me the confidence to keep going. Mind you, the market crashed like another year after that.
Sure.
Interest rates doubled. A couple banks went out of commission. So the market dried up, and I learned some big lessons these past 2 years, but things have definitely picked back up, and I'm back on track with my original production. But it's been a journey. Being a woman in this industry, I'm very unique. Being a Black woman in this industry, I'm in an even smaller niche group. but you realize that that just adds to your character. You know, I am first and foremost, I'm a broker, and I'm also a broker that happens to be a woman. I'm a broker that happens to be a Black woman. I'm also one of the best brokers out there. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, you know, I think that's absolutely amazing that one of your clients was like, I'm going to bet on you and give you this opportunity. So much in this industry is about, you know, people who have been there, kind of seeing the next generation coming up and being willing to open doors for them or give them a seat at the table. What do you think he saw in you that made him decide, like, yes, I'm going to actively invest in you building something brand new in this industry? Yeah,
well, I asked him, you know, out of all the brokers in San Francisco, why is he, you know, coming? He comes back, I've done almost his entire portfolio at this point. And he says, you answer your phone.
Oh, no.
If I text you, you text me right back, you know? And also when deals start to go sideways, as they do, I'm not going to give up and walk away from it or hide my head in the sand. I make sure, I'm tapping my microphone, I'm sorry. I make sure that the deal gets done.
Yeah.
And he trusts me with his deals. And we've definitely had some deals go sideways, but at the end of the day, they come out, you know, they get done.
Yeah.
And so he sort of brought me along his journey and really helped me along mine.
Sure. I'm curious, do you have any examples, you know, those deals that have gone sideways or upside down or topsy-turvy? Do you have any favorite stories or maybe mistakes that were made that you think really...
Yeah, I think you're going to trigger.
Maybe course corrected you or set you on like a better path after you had to problem solve?
I think so. I mean, I feel like that was every deal early in my career. I think we need to have like a trigger warning. You know, I'm bringing up gas stations. I've had
especially in California.
I was doing a deal in Atlanta, Georgia, with one of our clients that was based in LA. He's buying a shopping center out in Atlanta, Georgia, and we had the environmental report that the seller gave us was for the wrong property ultimately.
Oh my goodness.
So the bank's report came back that it was a former gas station, and then they insisted on doing a phase 2. And then, of course, there was water contamination, right?
Still for the wrong property.
This was on his property. So there were so many moving parts, and on top of that, the brokers were getting into, I mean, excuse my lack of a better phrase, they were getting into like a sword fight. They were like, it was just a show of power between the two brokers, and I realized that I was sort of in a locker room at that point. Yeah. So I stepped in, and I took control over the deal, because ultimately the debt is how the deal gets done.
Yeah.
So I separated those two, and I was able to negotiate with, because they didn't want
in this corner, you go in that corner.
Exactly.
Let the adults talk.
Exactly. They did not want us to drill, right? But we had already gone hard at this point on our deposit, so I had to go to the seller, and a lot of brokers are going to get mad at me, but I went to the seller and I was like, look, we want to buy your property. We're not trying to play games. Just let us do what we need to do to close the transaction. They finally gave in and said, okay. And that was that, because they were threatening to walk away, and they were both sides. So I got the sellers to I softened them up and got them to come over. Then the bank walked away. They were like, oh, on-site contamination, no thanks. And so this happened like a week before we were supposed to close. Oh, no. So then it was about scrambling to find a private money lender to step in on the bank side. And, you know, being from California is like lending in California. California private money lenders, we finally found one that was able to go nationwide. They stepped in, added a bunch of structure to the deal, but ultimately we got it done. We were able to get the no further action letter from the state and get the monitoring wells in. But ultimately we got the deal closed, but there were so many twists and turns. We actually had 2 lenders going, and one came in and said, because we were buying a shopping center with the Walgreens, but they were separately parceled. Oh, and so we were doing them with different lenders because the buyer was going to sell the Walgreens down the road to make more money. So But the lender on the shopping center was like, we ran a crime report on the area and we don't really like the property after all. So I had to call the police department and get a written statement about their opinion about the area. I had to go and consult some other people. And I had to write this long letter saying, the crime report doesn't matter. Yeah. It matters, but here are all the mitigants. We're putting in security systems. We're putting in lighting. We're going to have an on-site security guard. Look, we've even budgeted for this in our pro forma.
Yeah.
And then we got them comfortable with staying in the deal.
Wow.
So and I think this was like my first year independently as a broker. Like there was so much that I had to learn. The deal took me, I think, 3 months to close, which is kind of standard when you're dealing with like CMBS and credit unions. But I remember when we got our final approvals, I dropped to my knees and cried. It was one of the most intense deals that I had ever done in my life, but it also gave me so much confidence at that point. I can do anything.
Yeah, you're like, I walked through literal fire to get this deal closed. Yeah, give me your whatever strip mall and Empire. Let's go. I'm ready.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. I mean, so many good takeaways from that. First off, be willing to do the extra work and get as creative as possible. People didn't ask you to do that.
No.
People didn't ask you to go to the police department, get that statement. They didn't ask you to go through all these like different loopholes, to go to the seller themselves and ask questions and try to get them all to a good place. You did that.
Yeah.
So I think, especially, we were just talking about this in our keynote earlier today about being, an effective, empathetic person, about wanting to make people feel at ease, feel safe, especially when you're dealing with such high stakes money, like over almost $500 million of money in your career so far. That's not table stakes.
Yeah.
And the ability to go the extra mile, get creative, but also people at ease, that they're in good hands. Like that is such a valuable skill that you've demonstrated in this story, and I'm sure in many other deals. So before we get more into the world of mortgage banking, do you have any daily habits or like ways that you've built up those skills of being able to find like where are the rocks that haven't been turned over yet? How can I make people feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for our listeners on that end?
You really need to know what you're talking about. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. There are a lot of people that like to puff their chest and kind of spout off alternative facts. And I think I don't talk about deals that I don't necessarily work on, right? My deals on average range between like 1 to 10 million, and they go up to 25. All of my clients are based in California. 90% of my deals are in California, and I will go out, on special occasion if my client wants to go out. So you're not going to hear me talking about the New York markets or, underwriting standards for, a triple net deal in Florida. I will call the lenders in the market if I go out of my market, but I know my footprint. I have a set footprint. I'll do deals all the way from like Temecula or San Diego, all
my hometown,
all the way up to Eureka. I have a deal closing in Cottonwood this week. Where is that? Wow. Oh, nobody knows.
Yeah, good old Eureka. I went to school up in Oregon, so we'd drive up the 5.
Oh, okay, so you know exactly where that is.
Towns, like Glass Redding, there goes the last Cincinnati.
Yeah. So I think it's about, expanding your knowledge. So I do deals, I do industrial, retail, office, multifamily, and the past 2 years I survived, feeding mainly on SBA loans, learning the ins and outs of business lending, what their projections need to look like, making sure that, I have a healthy borrower and it's not just real estate based, it's also based on their business operations. That's a whole learning curve. But knowing what you're doing and being humble enough to know that you don't know everything, because there are surprises on every deal and they're all different. I wish I just had a magic wand and say, oh, multifamily, this is what it's going to look like. This is how it's closed. There's always something. Maybe there's a soft story, ordinance in that city. Maybe there's a new regulation you have to take into account rent control. Are they in line with the borrower's projections? There's always so much to learn. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what really adds value as both expertise, but also I think a bit of humility too. Mm-hmm. You don't want anybody explaining your property to you. There's nothing more insulting than having someone tell you about what you do. Yeah. I want to mansplain to any of my clients.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's your fiduciary duty to know as much as possible about the project you're working on, and you got to take it seriously. But also, the wise person knows that they know nothing. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. That humility is a huge part of it. So, I want to be mindful of our time. We have, unfortunately, just short sessions today, but let's get into the world of finance. Yeah. Financials. What's happening? You said you work across asset classes. Mm-hmm. You said you've been focusing on SBAs, which is a very interesting kind of subsection of the real estate market. So, since you started your business, the rush boom of 2020 on, what have you been seeing in the market?
Now it's starting to open back up. In 2023, I believe it was, when First Republic went down and Silicon Valley went down, then interest rates doubled, treasuries went up, everything froze. We were still getting some deals done, but I was doing about half of the amount of production that I was doing. Yeah. But I think the market hasn't necessarily gotten better. The interest rates haven't really gotten better. I think people are just getting used to where interest rates are. My borrowers have seen a dramatic drop in their property values, and it's of no fault of their own. It's due to low comps. If transactions aren't selling, you don't really know what your building's worth. Yeah. And also, there was a lot of refinancing going on in 2020, 2021, so there's been a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines. So you have a lot of buyers that now want to get discount rates on prime properties. And so that's been making sellers reluctant to sell their buildings. And I think they're finally getting to the point where they're seeing eye to eye. Sure. And so you're seeing more transactions happening where people feel like they're getting a good deal for their building. Yeah. And I think it's only going to get better from here. On the political side, I'm not sure. I don't think that the Fed is going to cut rates, nor do I think that they need to. We just had 10 years of quantitative easing. This bubble was inevitable. But we're finally just seeing a little bit more equilibrium in the market where it was not there for the past 2 years.
Sure. Things are starting to settle and people are, feel a little more comfortable. Now they have more information. It's more of a pattern, right? Yes. So they're at ease kind of moving forward with transactions, whereas a couple of years ago they would have been
a year, 6 months ago. Yeah. So I finished a transaction. I did a refinance for the client that helped me start my business. He finished his multifamily in San Francisco. It was 9 units. It appraised for $9 million. We put a bridge loan on it because we thought, we need to lease up the building, achieve these really high market rents. By the time that we refinanced the building 3 years later, the value came in at $4.5 million. Wow. Lost his shirt. He had to put $3 million, I think, into $2 to $3 million into the deal just to keep it.
My goodness.
So there's been a lot of that. So I think also because we've had this big wave of cash in refinances, people are way more reluctant to sell the building, essentially at a loss. They're not going to sell it for less than what they bought it for. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that does kind of contradict what I just said, but I think that there are more transactions happening, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from my investment sales brokers, that it's starting to open up, because there was a long time where they're just like, I'm not, my building's half of what it was worth. Yeah. I'm not selling anything.
Yeah, the write-off is not worth it.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Yeah. So,
yeah, it's an interesting predicament, and I feel like in California in particular, where the valuations kind of like net are so much higher than other corners of the country. It's, the stakes are all the higher. Yeah. So you really see if something doesn't pencil, it will not move forward unless it has to move forward. So kind of in that vein, are you seeing in the deals that are taking place, where's the creativity coming in? How are the terms being broken down? What kind of financing are people most interested in? I know there's been a lot of interest in like mezzanine and kind of more creative solutions. What do you see happening in the deals that are taking place?
I mean, there's always been interest in mezzanine, right? Because people don't always want like zero money down. Like this is a great financial crisis. Like that's not happening. I've been doing, private money's definitely stepped up to fill in the gaps where banks and credit unions weren't. CMBS is still relatively expensive, but they're still killing it.
Yeah.
I'm doing less bridge now because the idea was, we'll take a 2-year loan and then when rates are down, we'll refi. That's not happening. So I am seeing borrowers that are looking to maybe do like a 3-year ARM. So they'll do like a 3-year fixed and then it'll go adjustable for like 7 years, right? And so they'll get creative that way. But the only real creativity, unless you have a ton of equity in your building, and we're talking refinance, is if you have cash or if you have equity in another building. So I am doing more cross-collateralizations. I am doing cash-out refinances to put that money directly into the refinance of another building that needs a cash-in refi. I just did one with my these other set of borrowers who suddenly had to come up with a couple $100,000 before we closed. And so thank goodness they had a stock portfolio, so they were able to leverage their stock portfolio and put that into the building. And they were able to do that at 5%. Our loan was 6%, so they got a blended rate, and it actually brought their rate down, so it worked out for everyone. So that kind of creativity, but the reality is if you don't really have the cash or the equity, there's not a lot of creating. There's not a lot of creating to do.
It's an interesting pattern I see in that it's like you're weaving a web across your assets to facilitate access to more capital so that you can, in theory, make more money.
Exactly.
Off of either the appreciation
or hold on to your assets.
Yeah.
I don't see lenders coming to the table with higher loan to values. So, I mean, I think a lot of them just were unable to get a lot of their bridge loans off of their books or even their fixed rate loans that were maturing. So what I've been seeing is pretty much it's been 65% max across the board. Before we were at the 75 up to 80% loan to cost. Lenders are really, really, really wanting to cut back on their risk. And so not only are their spreads a little bit higher, their willingness to give you more leverage to buy the property or whatever. They're like, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it.
Sure. Yeah, they're tightening their belts a little bit. Do you see these banks kind of still leaning more into the world of commercial real estate, though? Because I know it's, the hidden asset class off on the side. People thought it was alternative for so long, and now I feel like in the last 5-10 years, it's kind of really taken more of a center stage role, or is getting there. Not
I think it's business as usual. I think banks that deal in commercial real estate are dealing in commercial real estate, and they're being more picky about the loans that they do. Just because they need to make sure that they can get those loans off of their books when they mature. But I'm not seeing more lenders throw their hat in the ring that weren't lending on commercial real estate before suddenly saying, now we have a new commercial real estate arm. I've heard that happening, but I've seen no action from them. So guys, if you're out there.
TBD. We'll see
opening those multifamily divisions. I mean, maybe we will start to see more lenders, but I think it's really the same players that have been here for the past few cycles.
And to kind of wrap us up, if you had to give a piece of advice either to maybe investors, maybe even women investors who really want to make the most of their access to capital and be able to get the financial backing they needed to facilitate the deals they want to make, what would your primary piece of advice be?
Liquidity is king. You can have, a great portfolio, but if you don't have money on your, lenders want to know that you can pay them back, right? So even if you have a nice portfolio, but your liquidity is only showing, 30 grand, or they want to have 10% of the loan amount in your checking account somewhere or in an asset portfolio. They do not want to see, no one is betting on the hopeful guys anymore. It's all about your balance sheet. Cash is king. but also don't over-lever your assets because you're going to need them at some point if you want to buy a property that's a little bit outside of your price point. So keep your leverage low, keep your liquidity high. And I was going to turn that into some sort of quip, but I
That's
can't.
it. That's the quip. Liquidity is king, or it's queen. Since
Liquidity is queen. There it is.
Daria, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Really had a lovely conversation. I'm sure we'll keep chatting offline.
Yeah.
Where can our listeners get in touch with you if they want to connect? Social media, email?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, Daria Walker. It's pretty easy to search. You can go to my website. It's really out of date though, WalkerRealtyCapital.com. And you can email me at dwalker@WalkerRealtyCapital.com. Happy to field any questions.
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.